We have about 10 minutes past the hour, and Helen Peppe is with us this morning. Good morning, Helen. Welcome to Midwest Opinions.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Can pigs really not swim?
No, they can swim.
Oh, they can. Okay, we were debating that. We did not know.
Well, we were Googling, but we didn't get the pigs didn't answer very quickly. I suppose the book you have written, and I find it very interesting. I don't have a lot of detail on it because someone took the book and read it, and so we don't have it here in front of us, so we're going to have to ask you to help us. Pigs Can't Swim is such an interesting title. It obviously causes a lot of curiosity. And why don't you give us a little background on, number one, who you are, and then number two, about Pigs Can't Swim?
Okay. Well, I am Helen Peppe, and I am the last of 9 children growing up in rural Maine. And the Pig Can't Swim title came from a little pig that my parents caught while we were on the way to a camp. And they brought the pig with us. And to get to this camp, you had to go down this long, unused logging road to a lake, and then you rode across the lake. Well, they rode the pig across the lake and then put him in a barrel, and after lunch he escapes. And he escapes by trying to swim back across the lake. The entire time he's swimming, my parents and my 8 other siblings are shouting, "Pigs can't swim. He's going to kill himself. He can't swim." But it's obvious to me, and I'm like 6 years old, saying, "Yes, he can swim. Look, he's swimming." And they're saying, "No, you don't know what you're talking about. Pigs can't swim."
Well, maybe this was just one of the pigs that could. You don't know about the rest of them. Go ahead.
All pigs can swim. There is a myth that pigs will cut their throats with their hooves when they're swimming. So that's where that came from.
Okay.
And my parents and siblings were so convinced by their own convictions and the myth that they'd held for so long that they didn't want to believe the evidence that was right in front of them. The pig was an excellent swimmer. And many animals are, and he would have escaped, and he didn't, if they hadn't cornered him with rowboats and caught him and put him back into the barrel.
And so on. Well, that's really good, because in spite of the evidence that's in front of us, sometimes we deny that because we have preconceived ideas.
Yes.
That
Whether
fits
it's
into
politics
a lot of what happens today.
Yeah, or identity, or anything. And I think that if you feel that those convictions are threatened, you become more and more and more defensive, because that's who your identity. That's how you've based your entire life. So you feel so threatened that you have to fight out.
Absolutely, and you have to fight out. And I think that with your book now, that was the impetus to your book. That particular instance that took place, and then tell us how you developed that and to what all of our listeners, I'm sure, could benefit from reading.
What happened was I needed to figure out my own food issues, which was that I didn't like to eat my pets. And growing up on a farm, it was the situation where we were eating animals that I loved and who had been my friends. Being the last of 9 kids, I was alone a lot because I was the youngest and 2.5 years between me and my next sibling. So it took me a while to figure out when an animal disappeared that it was the animal on the table. Once I figured that out, I didn't want to eat them any longer. And again, what happened is if anybody mentioned who that animal was, my mother would be very angry because she would have this boundary, this divider in her head where she wasn't really eating those animals. These were just, sheep or pigs or chicken.
Well,
it wasn't Jessie out there in the yard. So whenever anybody pushed against that, she would have a fit, which I can understand. But from my perspective as a logical child, I thought, well, why eat them when we have macaroni? There's lots of other things.
I chose macaroni, yeah.
I think maybe I would have too, and maybe bacon, but that's just me. Go ahead.
But the whole idea that where we struggle against what we see as evidence and we can't believe what's in front of us sort of is the grounding motivation for the entire book. And so that goes along with it. And, there's other things too. in the book, besides the food issues, it centers around a molestation when I was a child, very young. Mm-hmm. And, again, my parents saw things very differently. So instead of seeing it as a huge kind of thing where they needed to make sure the person who did it suffered, it was myself. It was me who they saw as the person who had done wrong. So that's kind of where the book goes. Is wasn't that they didn't love me or that they didn't love the pig or love information. They just resented anything coming in that was different from what they expected.
Well, and I think just the simple fact that you, the youngest of 9 children, would obviously be a book in itself. I mean, I just can't even begin to imagine that. I was the oldest child, oldest grandchild, as my sister put it, the chosen one. And and that's a burden to bear as well. And I'm sure at the other end, when you're the youngest of 9, did you have any cousins younger than you?
No.
No. So you were it. I mean,
I was it until my oldest sister had babies, and then I was an aunt at 4 years old, and she would bring her children home, and suddenly I wasn't the baby of the family any longer, and I wasn't the spoiled one. It was these 2 new ones coming in who were spoiled, and so kind of I felt that I no longer was getting even a little bit of my mother's attention that I had because there was 2 kids were coming in. So it was cool being an aunt, but not cool having them live with us or be with us and take my mom's attention.
And take your mother's attention. That's really what it comes down to, I think.
And break what few toys I had.
Yeah. And run off with the toys and take them to the yard. Well, and you were compelled to write this book. And how long is this book just coming out now as we speak?
It came out February 4th by Da Capo Press, and it took about 6 months to write the entire first draft. Once I started writing, it just kept coming and coming and coming, and then it took about a year to revise it and get it to a place where I felt the world could see it. Because I had there's always a balance. You want to leave stuff out that might be very hurtful to your family or to other people.
Well, and I'm waiting to write my book, but several of the people I want to write about are still living. So I have to wait.
You're waiting until they die.
Yeah, that's terrible to say, but, and it may be a while yet. But I come back to books and what inspires people to write books. And what you're saying is when you see something in evidence and then deny that evidence. Sherlock Holmes, I think, said this, that after you've exhausted every other possibility, what's left must be true. I mean, I'm loosely quoting the man. Maybe I made it up.
Right.
But I think that's true. If you look at all the other evidence and there's really nothing left, then it must be magic. I mean, or whatever. And I don't know whether you got to that after you looked at this and analyzed it. People tend to look at things, and it's like, what do they say? A witness, an eyewitness is the worst evidence that you could possibly have in any case. Because you could have 3 different eyewitnesses and they all see it differently.
They all see it differently because we see it based interpreting on who we are at that time. So there's a scene in the book where, and I use this in a course that I teach, where we're all riding the same horse, and then we love this horse, and then my oldest sister rides it, and she falls off the horse, and it's this mad ride up the road and across the yard, and she's dragged in a stirrup. Well, my mom is thinking, oh, look, my poor daughter, she's going to get hurt, and they're all worried about the daughter. One of my sisters, who's always really angry at this particular sister who's being dragged across the yard, is hoping she gets hurt. So she's thinking something completely different. And me, I'm thinking, oh, that poor horse having to drag all of that weight behind him as he's trying to get to the mud.
I see that growing up in your household must have been very interesting. Did you have a mixture of boys and girls, or all girls, or how did that break down with the 9?
There were 6 girls and 3 boys.
Okay. Boy, I tell you, yeah, the boys it would have been very interesting for the 3 boys, that's for sure.
Well,
and
it
especially
was very separate.
Very separate?
Mm-hmm. It was a very separate family, yes, because there's 9 kids, and my mother was only married for a year before the first daughter appeared. So then there was kind of a break midway through, so she had 6 kids, and then she had 3 kids later. So there was always the 6-kid family and then the 3-kid family.
I think that occurs sometimes in families so that the older ones can take care of the younger ones and the parents don't have to do it so much.
Don't have to do so much. But there was a ton of work, believe me, growing up.
If someone wanted to get hold of your book, and I find you very interesting, and you say teach classes, where do you teach and what subjects do you teach? Or what's your passion?
Well, right now I freelance teach, and the last place that I taught was at Bay Path College in Massachusetts. I did a class on memory and perspective as it relates to Pigs Can't Swim, and I also do some at the Stone Coast MFA program where I got my own MFA. And then right now, as I'm, trying to get this book out, I'm doing a lot of stuff at libraries and bookstores. Mm-hmm. And I do the presentation. I'm a photographer, an equine photographer, so I use a lot of my own pictures to illustrate that truth and honesty are very different. They do not mean the same thing at all.
That's very interesting, and I think you look at the book, Pigs Can't Swim, and then you come to these conclusions from it. I think it's very interesting, and I hope people will look. I'm sure the usual suspects is where we can go online and find your book.
Yes, you can go online and find it, but there's also a lot of independent bookstores that it's available if you wanted to order it off of that. It was an Indies Introduced title and an Indies Next Best Pick, so all of the Indies bookstores are carrying it. And you can also get it from DeCapo Press. So lots and lots of places to
Well, I can't thank you enough for being with us this morning, Helen. We appreciate you being with us, and we'll mention your book again. I love that, Pigs Can't Swim, and we encourage people to look it up.